to fire up all across the internet, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. And let's make sure YouTube is alive and well. Facebook looks good, but YouTube always takes a quick minute. But it looks like we're live, so let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney right here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today because we've got some stories to get into. We're going to start off by talking about the new kind of pseudo government that we have that controls a lot of what happens in this country. I'm talking about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg because today the Facebook Oversight Board came out and they're upholding the ban. I mean, if you recall, right after the January 6th Capitol Hill riots, there was this massacre. Anybody who was connected to Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself were just thrown right off of the internet. We don't want you anymore, is what the big tech bros said. And so there was an appeal kind of process that went on between Facebook and this organization they created called the Oversight Board. And the Oversight Board had almost this almost like a court proceeding where they were going to validate and determine whether or not Donald Trump could be on their platform. And of course, today the ruling came out. Ban has been upheld. Facebook does not like Donald Trump anymore, and that is going to be something we talk about. We're going to go through the Oversight Board opinion. We're going to look at the case. How did they come to this conclusion? What went into their mindset as they were sort of regulating free speech in their own little pernicious way? So we got a lot to unpack there, including Donald Trump's response, because he has a new platform now where he has it's almost like a Twitter clone kind of thing where he has these like little micro blog posts. So he responded. He has now access and availability to do that. So we're going to go through his response as well. Then in the next segment, we're going to talk about the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, a guy by the name of Alejandro Mayorkas, gave an interesting interview very recently that a lot of people are sort of scratching their heads about, talking about borders and in particular why we don't really need them so much anymore, or why they shouldn't in fact be a dividing line between nations. They should sort of like a boundary that maybe we just think about in the abstract, and they don't actually divide, political systems or certain types of resource distribution or anything like that. Instead, it should just be kind of one of those things that we just acknowledge exists, but trade and the meshing of countries is really kind of an afterthought, according to him. Then we have an update from Kamala Harris, and we want to know what she has to say about the border situation because she was appointed the border czar, and she was going to be somebody who was supposed to solve this problem for us some time ago. So we got an update on what she has been up to. And then in our final segment today, I have been somebody who has been questioning what BLM wants with their entire movement for a long period of time. Those of you who've been around this channel since the beginning know that we have been really beating the drum about criminal justice reform. And so when BLM came into the picture, I was thinking, well, maybe there's some good momentum here. Maybe we'll see some actual justice reform in this country finally, after my entire life of not seeing much done about anything. And I was always wondering, what do they want? What is going to make them happy and going to sort of satisfy the outcome that they want? And good news, they released a list. So if you go to blacklivesmatter.com, you can see their list of demands. We're going to go through some of those and see what they are. And then we've got somebody who's doing the opposite of their demands. We're talking about Ron DeSantis out of Florida, who is kind of doing the opposite. And so we're going to talk about that as well. We've got a lot to get into. We are going to move a little bit quickly today because I got a hard stop at about an hour and a half from now. So if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is by going over to our community at a website called locals.com. We have a platform there, a community, and it's called Watching the Watchers. And so if you want to be a part of the show, and by that I mean ask a question, leave a comment, throw out a criticism. If you want to just chat with other people as the show is happening, you can do that by going to watchingthewatchers.com. www.locals.com. Just type that into your web browser. Go on over there. You do have to support the show, but it's very inexpensive, and you get a ton of benefits if you do that. You get a copy of my book for free. You get you can download my existence systems. You get all of the updates. We're going to be producing a lot more content. We're talking about things like book clubs and monthly meetups, and a lot of good stuff is coming down the pike. So that's where you want to be watching The Watchers. .locals.com. We'd very much appreciate it. All right. So let's get into the news of the day, because there is a lot of it. As we all know, Donald Trump is persona non grata on the internet these days. He's basically been banned from everywhere. Everybody and everything after the Capitol Hill riots just said, well, we're done with you. And they eliminated him in a fell swoop, just sort of decimating the entire social media presence of a former president of this country. And so many people thought that that was highly problematic, given the fact that this is an elected official. Something like 80 million Americans rely on conversation and communication from this gentleman. He's a leader of a significant portion of this country. Well, that's all right. Facebook and a lot of the big tech companies said, we don't care about any of you people. Donald Trump is too dangerous, so we're throwing him out of here. Well, there has been sort of this response. People are not happy with that. And so what we're seeing is Facebook and some of these other tech conglomerates are now sort of outsourcing some of their responsibility to these boards that they set up. So Facebook did that. They have what's called the Oversight board. And we went through this on Monday. We were looking at the makeup of the board. Who are all these people, sort of, intellectuals from all over the world, free speech people, professors and blah, blah, blah. So they're all on this board. And what happened here is they needed to vet and verify and sort of double check Facebook's decision, because on January 7th, Facebook eliminated Donald Trump or suspended him. Then they sent this over to their oversight board. The oversight board, supposed to be independent, they're going to do their own analysis and then tell Facebook what to do about this. And so that happened today. And it was very bizarre. It's almost like a Supreme Court case. I mean, they have a case number and everything. And this case worked its way up the court, essentially, in Facebook. And they issued a ruling. And it felt like we were waiting for a ruling from the Supreme Court. I mean, we've done that here. The Supreme Court issues a ruling, or they grant certiorari on a certain case. We come, hey, look at that. Judge Thomas signed off on something. That's great. Same type of situation here, except this isn't a government. This is a private company, and we're talking about a public conversation space in the form of Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and everything else they own. And they're talking about whether people who are American citizens, and not just you or me, we're talking about former presidents, whether they can get access to that public forum. So very, very curious that we now have sort of pseudo-governmental bodies making decisions about our free speech. And I think this is a interesting dynamic that we're going to have to, I guess, get used to or do something about. But none of our elected officials seem to be in the latter category, unfortunately. So I guess get used to this. It's not going anywhere. Facebook upholds a ban, but will reassess the decision over coming months. This comes over from Lauren Feiner and Salvador Rodriguez, published over at CNBC.com. Said that Facebook's independent oversight board ruled on Wednesday, today, to uphold company's January decision to suspend Facebook and Instagram accounts of Donald Trump. The board said the indefinite time frame of the suspension, quote, was not appropriate. The board effectively punted the decision on the length of the suspension back to Facebook, saying it insists the company, quote, review this matter and determine and justify a proportionate response that is consistent with the rules that are applied to other users of the platform. The board asked Facebook to complete the review within 6 months and made suggestions for how to create clear policies that balance public safety and freedom of expression. We will now consider the board's decision and determine an action that is clear and appropriate, they said in a blog post. Facebook responded, in the meantime, Trump's account is going to remain suspended. So Facebook creates this oversight board. They say, hey, we've got this problem. We have a former president that many people are saying are dangerous. We don't know what to do about it. So out of an abundance of caution, we're going to suspend the president. I think that happened on January 7th, right after the Capitol Hill riots. And then they don't know what to do about it. So they create this board. Hey, you guys help us solve this decision, and we're going to pass it on over to you. The board receives the ball, catches it. Okay, we're going to analyze this thing, and then just, all right, we're going to throw it right back over to you there, Facebook. You need to come up with these policies. You need to justify a proportionate response. You need to determine policies and procedures that are applicable in this case, that are also consistent with your administration of other users on your platform. So, it's one big bureaucracy punting to another big bureaucracy, and then punting back to another big bureaucracy, which is pretty much how the courts work anyway. So that's great, right? They're in alignment with a lot of our other methods of governmental operations in this country. Meanwhile, the people who are being kicked around, like Donald Trump, are not allowed to be on these platforms, and many American citizens are not able to engage with their elected leaders because of this, because we have tech companies now dictating what type of content can be communicated on their platforms. And so I think really this is what they want. They don't really want to come up with a decision one way or the other. This is kind of the best outcome for them, because what happens? Practically speaking, these bureaucracies can kick the can to each other until the end of the world, right? Make these little modifications, little adjustments, and play this game like they're pretending that they're doing something. Well, we're investigating this. We do care about freedom of expression, but we got to balance public safety. And as you know, it's a very difficult thing to balance. And so we're just going to keep, passing the ball back and forth until the end of time. And in the meantime, of course, Donald Trump is not going to be on the platform. So it's just sort of this fake legitimacy. We're working on this issue, but we can't flesh it out. Meanwhile, Trump continues to become marginalized. Any ability for him to sort of rally his base around any particular cause, whether they're, my thought process here is, yes, they're going to send this back over to Facebook. They're going to say, reassess it in 6 months. They're going to make some policy changes, kick it back over to the board. All right, well, here are the policy changes. What do you think about these policy changes? Well, that sounds reasonable. We're going to suggest these changes, and then kick it back and back and back. Before you know it, right, midterms come and go. Trump has been muted. He's been effectively just sidelined as this continues on, because now he has no platform to communicate on. And we're seeing that he's starting to build his own, little communication platform. If you go to donaldjtrump.com/desk, I think is the URL, you'll see that, right? He's got his own version of Twitter there. And maybe that is the right solution anyways. We talked about this on Monday. Why would Donald Trump get back on Facebook? Well, they hold the keys to the castle at that point. If you want to play on their playground, you got to make certain concessions to them. And I'm not so sure that is what Trump wants to do. The converse to that, of course, is they have the platform. They have essentially a monopoly on the social media space in the form of Facebook and Instagram. So a very complicated issue, but it doesn't matter now anyways, because they're not going to let him back on for the next 6 months. All right, so let's take a look at the board's findings. The board found that Donald Trump, quote, severely violated Facebook's community standards with his post on January 6th, but it also said the platform seeks to avoid its responsibilities by applying a vague penalty and then referring it to the board to review. Trump's declaration on Facebook when he said, quote, "We love you, you're very special," referring to the people who rioted around the U.S. Capitol. I'm not sure that that's what he was referencing. Maybe he was talking about the protesters who were there, but not necessarily those who were rioting, calling the rioters great patriots, telling them to remember this day forever, right? And so I'm not sure that he was specifically talking about the people who were inside the Capitol building, but that's how this article is phrasing it. That's right, to be expected. Violated the Facebook's rules that prohibited praise of people engaged in violence, the board wrote. So I think you can make an argument for that, actually, right? If he's saying that he wasn't being specific, and hey, if you demand specificity about this stuff, then that's fine. I guess that is one standard. My point here being Donald Trump is saying, "We love you, you're very special." I guess he theoretically could have been talking about the guy in Nancy Pelosi's office with his feet on her desk, or he could have been talking about the protesters. We'll never know. But if he didn't clarify it, I can see how one side will pick the argument that best serves their political ends. The board found that in maintaining an unfounded narrative of electoral fraud and persistent calls to action, Mr. Trump created an environment where a serious risk of violence was possible, the board wrote. They said Trump posted his statements, quote, "When he did it, there was a clear and immediate risk of harm, and his words of support for those involved in the riots legitimized their violent action." So again, right, they're sort of presupposing the premise. They're supposing that what Trump said, "We love you, you're very special," that he was referring to the rioters. He was referring to the people inside the Capitol building. I don't think that's facts in evidence. I don't think that Trump meant that. You can imply that, you can extract that from that, but you have to understand and recognize that you're doing that for a political bend, right? You have an outcome that you want. You're looking at a set of words. You're coming to a conclusion based on your interpretation of that, and you're applying that in a broader context. So then they're passing rules based on a premise that they're essentially establishing. So you could easily do the opposite of this, right? So you can just see how you can manipulate the words. It's so transparently obvious. It's It's not even attempting to hide it, right? It's obvious. Facebook's decision to make the ban indefinite was not justified, the board said, since it did not follow a clear published procedure. So they just want them to formalize it a little bit more rather than applying vague, standardless penalties, then referring the case to the board to resolve. The board declines Facebook's request and insists Facebook apply and justify a defined penalty. So if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you create a board, you fund it with all this money, you send them over a task to do something, they send it back and say, no, we're not going to do it. It's you guys who are going to do that. All right, I guess that's one way to do it. On a call with reporters following the decision, Oversight Board co-chair Helly Thorning-Schmidt said the group was basically, quote, telling Facebook that they can't just invent new unwritten rules, which I agree with, when they find it convenient. Co-chair Michael McConnell said it's far from the first time Facebook has made up ad hoc rules. They all do this, right? We've seen this. They all do it. And YouTube is not without sin in this conversation. They all do it. Twitter does it. We don't like that now, so we're going to add a context box. Well, we don't like that now, so we're not going to let you retweet it, right? We're going to add certain algorithmic penalties that stop the distribution of the content because they don't like it. They change the rules after the fact. They set the rules, you come onto the platform, you play ball, they don't like the rules, they change them after the fact and they throw you off, even though you're somebody who's contributing content and helping to support the platform by engaging it, right? And what the downside to this is that can happen, and you've seen this on YouTube and elsewhere, where these platforms will have a content creator, somebody come out here, work on the channel for years and years and years, contribute their heart and soul to the place, and then they're just deleted without any warning, or they get demonetized with very little explanation, and there's almost no ability to converse with anybody on the other side of this. Meanwhile, it's not just about dollars and cents. We're talking about free speech issues. It's not just about some guy with a small YouTube channel being demonetized. It's that times 1,000 that chills speech. It's that times 100,000 potential people who want to hear from somebody, who might be voters, who want to get information, who need access to this stuff in order to participate in America. And the tech platforms are saying, no, you don't get that. Sorry. We're going to manipulate the rules enough that it's going to tip the scales ever so slightly in our favor, not enough that anybody pounds their hands on the table about this, not enough that the Congress people are getting, phone calls from their constituents to the level that they start taking action on this. Just a slow simmer, just ever so slightly tip the scale in their favor. You take one of the most famous, powerful, provocative, volatile, entertaining, engaging leaders in the history of America, and he doesn't get access to communicate with other people who are also Americans, who also want to communicate with that person. It's a troubling time. And these are unelected people. This is just a board of people who just created this out of the private sector, bunch of Stanford, Columbia, whatever, intellectuals coming out there and telling Facebook how to control speech in America. And if you're one of these people, that's a private company. They can do whatever they want. All right, well, we'll see where that leads, because we tried that back then, back in the early 1940s, 50s. We had segregation. We had all of these private businesses just, violating civil rights across the board because it was a private business. Well, in America, we don't like that. We don't like when you treat people like garbage, when you undermine and wash away some of the most fundamental principles of American life. And, we don't like when you discriminate against people. It's not okay when you do it racially or on gender or on sexual orientation. Not okay when you do it based on political ideology either. And we're going to see how this flushes out down the line. Let's take a quick look at the decision. As I mentioned, there is an actual case number here. So we have case decision 2021001 FB FBR, and it is an actual case summary. So it's kind of surreal. There are a lot of big companies that have pseudo legal processes, right? You see this all the time. You have arbitrations, you have mediations. A lot of having a pseudo legal process in and of itself is not anything that's particularly interesting. But the fact that this involves a former president on an access to essentially what is like a how many hundreds of millions of users are on Facebook? I mean, it's like almost access to a country in some degree, or to a state. It is such a big entity. It's almost even hard to fathom. It's bigger than countries. So it is a big thing here we're talking about. A very big liberty interest is in battle right now. We're talking about free speech. We're talking about political association, free assembly, on and on and on. And we have a private company, pseudo-private company, right? I mean, it's a publicly traded company, and we basically know that they own large portions of Congress as it is. So I would say it's a sort of a pseudo-government, complex where these two mega industries have just sort of merged together to create this really, really disgusting thing that's happening in this country. Anyways, enough of this. The point here is this resembles a legal process. This resembles something that you would see come down from the Supreme Court, and you would say, wow, this is a big deal. This is a decision that is impacting free speech across this entire country. This would be a big deal if this came out of the Supreme Court. Of course, it didn't, but practically, this is going to have a massive impact on people in this country. Much in the same way, or even more so than a Supreme Court decision. Because remember, a Supreme Court decision and free speech, a lot of these issues are academic issues. When people are talking about free speech and free expression in the court of law, when they're filing lawsuits over denial to certain rights, we're sort of talking about stuff that most people don't engage in on a day-to-day basis. Most people are not out there getting arrested for protesting and then having to file for their civil rights being violated and sort of attacking that on that basis, working its way up the courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court until we get a decision that gives us some guidance on this issue. It's not what we're talking about, right? Most people don't go that route. Most people, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter every day. So when these decisions come down, people arguably are going to be more impacted by Facebook's decision than they would from a Supreme Court decision, because that decision is regulating conduct that they don't really engage in frequently. But they are on Facebook 50 times a day. They are on Instagram morning, evening, and afternoon and night. That's where they live. So what if you have free speech in the court of law? That's great, right? We want that. But we also need to be very clear that a lot of the conversations are taking place on other platforms in these other tech countries, really. And if they are excommunicating elected leaders, that has very serious ramifications for free speech today and down the line for kids and kids' kids, children's. Huge ramifications. And this is now what looks like to be just kind of commonplace. Just, all right, well, here's a case summary. The Facebook Supreme Court has decided that, former president can't be on your platform. The board upheld the decision from Facebook on January 7th to restrict President Donald Trump's access to posting content on his Facebook page and Instagram account. They said it was not appropriate. The board insists that Facebook review the matter to determine and justify a proportionate response. They must complete the review within 6 months. The board also made policy recommendations to develop clear, necessary, and proportionate responses that promote public safety and respect freedom of expression. Key findings: the board found that 2 posts by Mr. Trump on January 6th violated the Facebook guidelines, specifically where he said, "We love you. You're very special," in the first post, and quote, "great patriots, and remember this day forever," in the second post. And again, you can have arguments about that. Or you can say, who's he talking about? Is he talking about the protesters? Is he talking about his voters? Is he talking about, the people outside the Capitol building or the people inside the Capitol building? Who knows? But Facebook determined, sort of looked at it in the worst possible light and then made a judgment based on that decision. The board found that in maintaining an unfounded narrative of electoral fraud and persistent calls to action, Mr. Trump created an environment where a serious risk of violence was possible. At the time Trump post, there was a clear, immediate risk of harm, and his words of support for those involved in the riots legitimized their actions. As president, he had a high level of influence. Post was large, 35 million followers on Facebook, 24 million on Instagram, and I think he had like 80 million on Twitter. Given the seriousness of the violations, the ongoing risk of violence, they were justified, the board said. However, not appropriate for an indefinite suspension, so you got to come back and take a look at it again. Not permissible to keep a user off the platform for an undefined period with no criteria on whether or when the account will be restored, which is good. I actually agree with this. I think that this is good. It makes sense for users to know what the boundaries are. We do this in law often too. Okay, it's very difficult to prosecute somebody for a crime that they didn't know was a crime. Now, I know ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's not what I'm talking about here. But if you sort of engage in certain conduct and then you sort of criminalize that conduct after the fact, you just change the rules. And it's difficult to know how to behave in a society when you don't know what the rules are. And so it's sort of a fundamental concept. Now, again, don't mishear me. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You can't break the law and go, I didn't know that. And you didn't know? Well, there you go. You're set to go free, not guilty there. That's not how that works. But it's a sort of a more fundamental principle that in society, we want to know what the rules are so that we can operate within them. That just creates good, smooth discourse between people. In applying the penalty, the board says that Facebook did not follow a clear published procedure. Indefinite suspensions are not described in the company's content policies. Their normal penalties include removing the violating content, imposing a time-bound period of suspension, and permanently disabling the page. Facebook's role is to create necessary and proportionate penalties that respond to severe violations. The board's role is to ensure that Facebook's rules and processes are consistent with its content policies, its values, and its human rights commitment. So it says here, no vague standards. And Facebook is not going to, the board is not going to allow Facebook to escape its responsibilities. So it says here, within 6 months, Facebook must re-examine the arbitrary penalty it imposed on January 7th and decide the appropriate penalty. This penalty must be based on the gravity of the violation and the prospect of future harm. So we have two elements, it sounds like, the gravity of the violation and the prospect of the future harm. So you'll see this in courts when they will actually, we went through this with the Derek Chauvin trial. Remember, causation, we got to prove that George Floyd died, got to prove it happened within the jurisdiction, got to prove that there was a significant substantial injury, whatever the language of the statute was. Different elements. If you check all the boxes, boom, you get a conviction. The jury did that. They say that's enough. So same thing here, essentially, but we're talking more about a balancing test. We're saying, okay, we have certain factors that we need to consider in connection with one another. One, the gravity of the violation. What was the violation? Well, it's Trump's statements that, you're great patriots or whatever. All right, is that serious? If you are in the camp that says he was talking about the people with their feet on Pelosi's desk, then yeah, that's a pretty serious violation because somebody was inside the Capitol building when they shouldn't have been. It's a criminal violation. If you think Trump was talking about them, then you would weigh this factor high. You would say the gravity of the violation was very high. Then you balance that against the prospect of future harm. Is this going to happen again if Trump gets up there and says, hey, you guys are great patriots, and this whole last thing that happened on November 4th was the F word. Well, are we going to see another storming of the Capitol again? I don't know. Maybe. If you're on the Facebook board, you probably think so. Yes. If you're on CNN, you're sort of on edge. You think that might happen tonight. It could happen tomorrow, any minute now. More National Guard, right? So it just sort of depends on how you want to phrase this, and they're going to phrase it in a way that meets their end goal. It must also be consistent with Facebook's rules for severe violations. If Facebook decides to restore Trump's account, companies should apply its rules to that decision, including any changes made in response to the policy recommendations below. A minority of the board emphasized Facebook should take steps to prevent the repetition of adverse human rights impacts and ensure that users who seek reinstatement after suspension recognize their wrongdoing and commit to observing the rules in the future. What does that sound like? It sounds like they want an apology. They are offended that you were offensive, and so you got to formulate an apology. So I'm sorry, Facebook. I'm sorry, Mark. I know I'm not going to do that again. All right. So when it referred to this case to the board, Facebook specifically requested observations or recommendations from the board about suspensions when the user is a political leader. In a policy advisory statement, the board member made a number of recommendations to guide Facebook's policies. The board stated that it is not always useful to draw a firm distinction between political leaders and other influential leaders. When the same rules should apply to all users, context matters when assessing the probability and the imminence of harm. So we've got some other factors, right? The imminence of harm, how likely or how quickly is it going to happen? So we got probability, which is how likely is this thing going to happen? And then the imminence, how soon, right? Do we need to act quickly? Is this like a new threat, something that we can expect to happen quickly? Or is this a distant threat that maybe we can make some other modifications and changes? Because remember that throwing somebody off a platform is a pretty immediate and drastic action. It's not minimal, right? A small suspension is a different conversation, or a limitation of certain features is a different type of penalty. But when you boot somebody off, probably should have a pretty good reason to do that. When posts by influential users pose a high probability of imminent harm, Facebook should also act quickly. Facebook should publicly explain the rules that it uses when imposing account-level sanctions against influential users. I think this is absolutely necessary. And when we were playing around with the digital Bill of Rights ideas, this was one of those that was in there. This was one of those that said specifically that if you're going to be penalized or sanctioned or disciplined, there needs to be an appeal process. You need to have some due process in this, because many people like us, I've been working on our channel here for years. And if that got just deleted, that would be awful. That would be a terrible thing. I would be very upset about that, because I've invested a lot into it. And so I think that because of this relationship that we've created, that we should be entitled to some level of due process, in particular when it comes to political speech, which is a highly protected form of speech in this country. So the users should have a little bit more protection. They should know about what the violations are so that they can modify their behavior. If you don't know, then you can't follow the rules, and that is a very big problem. Other recommendations that came out from the board said to rapidly escalate content containing political speech from highly influential users to specialized staff who are familiar with the linguistic and political context. So we have some sort of minders, it sounds like, who are going to be watching anything that comes from highly influential users. It's going to go to a board, another sort of internal user, specialized staff who's going to assess what to do with it. Dedicate adequate resourcing and expertise to assess risks of harm. Produce more information to help users understand and evaluate the newsworthiness allowance, including how it applies to influential accounts. The company should also clearly explain the rationale, standards, and processes of the cross-check review and report on the relative error rates of determinations made through cross-check compared with ordinary enforcement procedures. Okay, so it sounds like Facebook has some sort of process whereby if somebody flags something as a problem, they may have another user just cross-check it. So person A says, oh, Trump said that. That's offensive to me. Goes over to person B. Oh, yeah, that's offensive to me too. Boom, that tweet gets removed or eliminated or whatever. Versus if they disagree, maybe that goes to a third person who breaks the tie. We do stuff like that in the law as well. Undertake a comprehensive review of Facebook's potential contribution to the narrative of electoral fraud, right? And most of the people the last time I heard that were actually there at the Capitol building were organizing largely on Facebook, right? Parler and some of these other platforms bared the brunt of the blame for that. But when everybody looked into it, I think even the FBI corroborated it, that this was all sort of being organized on Facebook. But they got rid of Parler. Okay. So make clear in its corporate human rights policy how it collects and preserves and all of this other stuff, explains its strikes and penalties process for restricting profiles, include the number of profile page and account restrictions in its transparency reporting with information broken down by region. So I'm good with that. Yeah, more transparency, definitely. Provides users with accessible information on how many violations, strikes, and penalties have been assessed against them. I totally agree with that. Develop and publish a policy that governs Facebook's response to crises or novel situations where its regular processes would not prevent or avoid imminent harm. All right, so I think that sounds reasonable. The full case decision, we can go through it. I'm not going to read through this because we spent enough time on this, but I just want to show you, sort of the framework, how this works, because it resembles a court opinion. We're going to go through this quickly. Here we can see full case decision. That it says here, we're going to answer two questions. Considering Facebook's values, specifically its commitment to voice and safety, did it correctly decide that Donald Trump should be banned for an indefinite amount of time? So we got two issues. You see this all the time in law, right? Two questions. It looks just like a Supreme Court opinion, kind of. In addition to the board's determination on whether to uphold or overturn the indefinite suspension, Facebook welcomes observations or recommendations from the board about suspensions when the user is a political leader. So we talk about this, right? Issue, rule, application, conclusion, Iraq. It's a very common way to do legal analysis. What are the issues? Well, we got them right here. Did we make the right decision on January 7th? And if we want to, move forward in the future, how should we act when it comes to political leaders who are saying bad things? Those are our issues. Well, how are we going to determine what to do about this? So let's take a quick look. Decision summary says that, yep, they're going to uphold it. However, blah, blah, blah. We went through what they're saying. The relevant standards. So what is the rule? What are we doing? What are the rules that we should be applying, right? We know what the issues are. What's the rule? Well, the rule is Facebook community standards. They have already written the rules out. So they got to go through these and apply them to the facts. We also have the violence and incitement section. We have Facebook's terms of service. These are the rules. We have the introduction to the community standards. Those are the rules. Then we go to Facebook's values, okay? So you're sort of within an organization, you want to establish values so that you know how to operate. These are sort of your guideposts. And so here we talk about safety, clarity, and hope at the R&R Law Group. Those are our guiding values. Those are our guiding principles. They've got voice, safety, and dignity. Let's take a look over here. Voice, safety, and dignity. Those are their values. And so the question is Facebook's conduct in alignment with one of these values? They describe voice as wanting people to talk openly about issues that matter to them. Does the ban contribute to voice? Does it embody their values? Same thing for safety. Same thing for dignity. And we do that here at the firm, right? If one course of action does not provide our clients with more safety, well, we're not going to do that, right? And so we have to always keep those things in mind. Then we have some other standards that they run through. We have human rights standards. So they have a corporate human rights policy. They are in accordance with the UN guiding principles. Then we also look around at other different documents. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So now we've got some international organizations that are basically being kind of brought into the United States. Like for me, an analysis, if we want to go to the rules section, would be very simple. First Amendment says free expression, free association, and a lot of other very important things. And we got a million different cases that can all support that rule. So you just apply the rule. Oh, you threw a political leader off of a public forum, essentially, because you own everything in this country. It's essentially a monopoly on social media. You are below the line on the free speech standard. You're dropping below the desires or the intentions of the First Amendment. It was meant to allow free speech in this country, okay? And in particular, political speech. What you're doing here is not adhering to those principles. Now, what you are intending to do is go around the world and drag in a bunch of other stuff like an International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All right, where'd that come from? Human Rights Committee. Okay, we have the Rabat Plan of Action, which is great. We got the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom. All right, good job. We got the Joint Statement of the International Freedom of Expression Monitors on COVID-19. Great, okay. We got a bunch of other articles, the right to life, the right of a security of a person, non-discrimination, participation in public affairs, the right to a remedy, all from the UN and all of these other organizations, right? Okay, I know Facebook is an international organization and they're talking about this from international perspectives, but not in this case. We're talking about the U.S. president in the United States of America not being able to communicate with his constituents and with American citizens. So, all right, if they want to bring in the UN Special Rapporteur, if they want to bring in the General International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, fine, they can look to that stuff as a reference tool. But the point here is that the First Amendment is pretty clear, and Facebook's conduct here is falling below that line, in my opinion, because the impact here is a diminution of the word that I'm trying to say that starts with a D. You know what it is. It means that our rights are being diminished, and it is not a good thing. So let's finish out this segment. It says here, we want to know about the context. The posts were made during a time of high political tension centered on the unfounded claim that the November 2020 election had been the S word. Okay, so they're giving us some context. What are the facts of the case? We have the status of the speaker. We have the intent of the board. The board is not in a position to conclusively assess Mr. Trump's intentions. You don't say. The possibility of violence linked to Trump's statements was clear. Okay, and the board considered that he likely knew or should have known that these communications would pose a risk of legitimizing or encouraging violence. Well, he said peacefully. We're going to march down there peacefully. So I guess it was implied, or he should have known. I think that is probably should have known, maybe is where they're going to stick on this, even though I disagree with that. Content on the forum. He made 2 posts that were posted later. Large following. So they're analyzing the extent and the reach. These are the different factors, right, that they're analyzing. So they're going to say, well, we're going to try to determine whether we should ban someone. How should we go through this analysis? Well, we're going to look. These are the factors. What's the status of the speaker? Influential or not? What's the intent of the speaker? Well, we don't know, but we're going to pretend that we know. What's the content in the form? What did they actually post? Was it a video? Was it a picture? Was it written text? What form did it take? How did it land on our platform? What was the extent and the reach? Did 10 people hear this, or did 35 million people hear that? Because that is going to be relative to the potential for violence or potential for harm. Then the imminence of the harm. How soon is this going to happen, and how quickly do we need to act? So it says by analyzing all of these different factors, the board concludes that the violation in this case was severe. in terms of its human rights harms. Facebook's imposition was necessary and appropriate. The imposition of the ban. So this is the final conclusion. Now, Big Donnie T now is responding, and I think we're allowed to read this because I don't think this is anything illegal. This is Donald Trump over on his new platform. Says what Facebook, Twitter, and Google have done is a total disgrace and embarrassment to our country. Free speech has been taken away from the president of the United States because the radical left lunatics are afraid of the truth, but the truth will come out anyway, bigger and stronger than ever before. The people of our country will not stand for it. The corrupt social media companies must pay a political price, okay? Must pay a political price, okay? He said political price. No other type of price at the ballot box. Good Lord, just got to clear that up. Must never be allowed. Okay, we're going to not read that last sentence, but the rest of this is, is just Donald Trump. We got questions coming in from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. So we're going to jump in and we're going to ask LT13, what's going on? He says, the National Pulse did a story on this and the independent panel is full of never Trumpers who openly posted about it. Well, that sounds obvious, right? We all kind of expected that, I think. We have Sharon Quidney in the house, says, would it be totally out of line to consider these technocratic oligarchies, Facebook and big media, as a kind of shadow government? I'm thinking of how they influence elections, shape public opinions, etc. I actually completely agree with that, Sharon. And so I think a lot of people in this country have sort of been indoctrinated to think that what exists in America is sort of this hierarchy of power. You've got the government at the top, then you've got sort of the corporations next, then you maybe have, some of the social institutions next, like the churches, or maybe those are ahead of the corporations. But you've got this hierarchy. Then you've got big business, small business. Then you've got, some of the cultural institutions that exist throughout society, like organizations, sporting events, and all these. And it's all structured in this hierarchy. And it's a top-down approach. And I think largely that's a pretty good representation of American society, except for the fact that the government is really at the top. I don't really even necessarily agree with that. I mean, legally, technically, practically, yes, if the government wants to wield the sword any which way, yeah, it's going to crack the head right off of any one of these corporations. I mean, really, because they ultimately wield the biggest sword. But practically speaking, it doesn't really operate like that. At the top of the pyramid, I'm not so sure that I would say that it is a U.S. senator, right, over, or at least relative to a Mark Zuckerberg or a Jeff Bezos that control so many more assets that the relative power of a Bezos to a Ted Cruz even, I don't think there's really any even comparison, honestly, because he controls a huge part of the infrastructure of the entire country, arguably the world. One man. Through the extension of Amazon. And Zuckerberg, same thing, through the extensions of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. He's a global force for power. And so really, those people, I think, have more power than most of our elected officials. Now, if the government, got in unison and they said, all right, that's it, we're going to wipe out Facebook, they could do it. But I don't think that they will, because practically, they could do it. Will they? Politically, could they do it? I don't think so, because I think that they are basically bought and paid for. They're owned by the real power brokers in this country. And, many people, I just don't think that they understand the scope, the size of these places, the size of these organizations. I mean, Facebook, how many employees do they have? How many billion, what's their GDP relative to some other countries in the world? They're bigger than many countries. They have more employees than other countries have standing armies. It's a massive, massive operation, and they have massive power as a result of that. So when we are all just sort of, smashing our heads against our desks because we're mad at the government, remember, yeah, they're technically at the top of this thing, but you have big influence from many, many other variables that are also interplaying here. And we have to consider those things because, like I said, you might have a Supreme Court case that comes out of the U.S. Supreme Court that really doesn't impact you because it's not applicable to you. Yes, it technically changes the law, but you're not going to be somebody who gets arrested and cares about your Miranda right violation, right? That's probably not going to happen to you. Most people in this country are not going to be arrested and have any Miranda violations that they have to worry about. So what do they care if the Supreme Court comes and changes that? They don't. But if Facebook comes out and eliminates a certain politician or a certain ideology or a certain political group from even participating, that's going to impact you all day. It's going to impact millions and millions of Americans, whereas another Supreme Court decision wouldn't. So you have a bigger effect from one of these organizations. And I agree with you, Sharon. It is almost like a pseudo government, that's sort of layered. When you talk about programming code and sort of layers of instructions and interfaces, I think it's more analogous to that rather than a triangle. Paula MK in the house says, so Trump praised violent protesters and got banned, but Kamala can have a GoFundMe for violent BLM protesters bail, and that's totally okay. Can we start that new network country yet? Yes, we can, Paula MK. And your question is so closely connected to Sharon's on the last one, right? This is already kind of happening. So there are these sort of crypto network states that we talked about some time ago. The guy's name, who is really the voice that introduced me to this whole concept, is Balaji Srinivasan. And the more and more I've been toying around with this idea, the more and more I'm starting to recognize that a lot of this is kind of in existence already, right? I mean, think about this. How much time do you spend out of your house in physical spaces versus how much time you spend on the internet in digital spaces, right? It's no comparison for me. Not at all. I'm on the internet way more time than I'm out at a restaurant or out at a park or out at at a public facility anywhere. Most of my time is spent digitally. A lot of it's on YouTube. A lot of it's elsewhere on locals and different places. So we're already kind of moving a lot of our lives online, digitizing a lot of it. And so, I don't personally, in terms of me getting out there and using my free speech, I am not going to be a person with a bullhorn on the side of a corner. So I don't, if I have free speech there, that's great. Nobody can hear me. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to listen to a guy with a bullhorn on the side of the corner. But if we want to get on the internet and express ourselves, that is the new forum because our lives have gone digital. We're online most of the time. Most people are working from home still. A lot of people are. So COVID has really accelerated this. We are all going digital and we're all taking around and looking at these countries that we're visiting, like Facebook and like Amazon and like Twitter. And we're going, these countries are dumps. This is awful. They don't let us express ourselves. And so other platforms are now cropping up and we're saying, all right, well, we're going to pack up our stuff and go over there. And right now, these are social media companies. Right now, these are just entities where we post pictures and share and chat and comment and watch videos and engage with each other. But in the future, okay, you might be doing business. We might have watching the watchers, whatever, right? Where a store and a brand and the whole thing. And it's happening digitally because we're all communicating digitally on these platforms that allow us to express ourselves without fear of reprisal from the current state of tech bros. Paula MK, good question. We got ATB Kelly says, how can we balance the importance of allowing private companies to monitor their own channels, which seems they have a right to do, with the right to free speech that seems to be impeded by the actions of these entities? It wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't for these media channels being relatively monopolized by a few individuals. And so ATB Kelly 100, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that really is the problem. It is this monopolization of it because I agree, it's a very delicate balance. And I am also not somebody who wants, I'm very, very in support of free speech. I think it's fundamental to our country. And it's very important for us to improve society. We can't improve anything if we can't talk about things. And so when it comes to the big tech companies, I also agree that they should be able to have some sort of limitations against violent threats. They don't want to be held liable for that. I don't want, a tech company to be required to have somebody who gets on there and makes active violent threats. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about the same free speech protections that we apply in the public square, I think should also apply on the digital square, largely due to the fact that they are monopolized. You don't have the ability to just pick up your ball and go to a different platform. There aren't any. And the ones that have tried to have been propped up have been eliminated because there has been this secret cabal of the tech companies that colluded in order to make that happen. Soon as everybody bailed over to Parler, what happened? Twitter calls up Amazon. Twitter hosts their servers with Amazon. That's a multi-million, maybe billion-dollar deal over the course of who knows how long. And so if Twitter doesn't like that Amazon is also hosting Parler, Twitter picks up the phone, says Amazon, they're doing dangerous stuff over there. Amazon says, hey, yeah, you're right. We look at our terms of service. They get deleted. So you've got this collusion of the current tech companies working against the opposition that they deem to be dangerous, and they are using their power to silence an entire political demographic in this country. And so that type of behavior is reprehensible. That drops below the line of the First Amendment. All I'm asking for is the same First Amendment protections, the same First Amendment concepts that we experience in America be applied to the tech companies. And I think that's a pretty fair balance. And we have tons of case law, tons of supporting documents, and tons of historical context to do this, because we've done it many times when civil rights have been violated elsewhere. We've done it during the civil rights movement under MLK and that entire, obviously a very big movement, but we're seeing it even more recently. We're seeing it in terms of gay marriage, right? That was a civil right that was not recognized until the Supreme Court recognized it and said you can't discriminate against people on that basis anymore. You cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender or race, or how about political expression? And I don't mean that you have to allow people to sort of, get out there and say whatever they want, but they need to be at least guaranteed the same opportunity somewhere, because that is the First Amendment. Freedom of expression without the curtailment of the government, or without the curtailment of a pseudo government like Facebook. We also have Paula MK says, when they ban someone like Trump, not only are they infringing on his freedom of speech, but they take everyone's freedom of speech away. They effectively have taken away our ability to communicate with that person, which is an infringement on our own rights as well. It's an excellent point, Paula. Excellent point. And you're a user of their platform, but they don't care. No Doubt says, how will laws like what Florida is considering, preventing social media companies from censoring or banning elected officials, affect decisions by Facebook and their court? So I don't know, actually. This is going to be an interesting question. I don't know what they're going to do about this. We've seen some precedent for some of this stuff with other companies. Remember when Uber and Lyft, there was a bill that was working its way through California where they were going to say that Uber and Lyft had to characterize their drivers as employees versus independent contractors. I think that ultimately failed in California, but it was very close to passing. And basically Uber and Lyft were threatening, say, okay, if you're going to make them employees, we're just going to pull out. There's not going to be Uber. There's not going to be Lyft anymore. We're just going to pick up and go, because we're not going to be profitable under that business model. We can't afford it. So we're just going to get up and leave. Well, as soon as that word spreads a little bit, guess what happens? Voters don't like that idea. Hey, we use Uber all the time. It's great. Love that platform. You're kidding me? They call their congresspeople. Congresspeople then suddenly make some changes, or it loses the political willpower, the political momentum, and it never actually becomes law. So you might see something like that, right? If Florida passes this, the governor signs it, maybe Facebook says, all right, well, we're just going to shut off Facebook in your state. And people say, well, we love Facebook. I got my group on there. I got my business on there. Are you out of your mind? That's insane. Then you have a lot of political pressure to reverse course. T. Spev says, with Facebook having a board to decide to ban people, would they not 100% be stepping up as a publisher and no longer fall under Section 230? So, arguably, yes. I mean, this is the conversation about this, whether they should be characterized one way or the other. But Section 230 is still giving them full, basically, immunity for anything that people post. Now, the response to that is, yeah, if they are going to be, censoring stuff, there's an editorial process. It's not now. The reason they're shielded from liability is because how can you expect Facebook, that has 1 billion users, to manage and monitor every single one of those posts? You can't. It's insane. It's impossible. So you shield them. You give them some liability protection. But now they got algorithms. They've got boards. They've got an oversight board. They've got all these different moderators. So the question is, did the nature of the company that justified Section 230, did that change? Section 230 was great back in the 1990s when it was passed, I believe is when it was. But a lot has changed now. Now they can moderate. Now they are monitoring people. Now they are kicking people off the platforms. They are censoring people. So it is editorial. They are now publishers, and they should be regulated and outside under the purview of 230. We have Leafy Bug in the house. Says, does anyone seriously believe this laughable Supreme Court of Facebook, the scoff, ooh, that's fun, would ever, quote, issue a ruling that its management doesn't approve of or haven't previously signed off on? Imagine the scoff determining that Facebook needs to break up, or that Zuck needs to sell his stock, or whatever. Yeah, right. It's a grift for the scoffers, and exists solely to provide a veil of accountability to an unaccountable organization. That is bravo, Leafy Bug. Well done. Let's read that again. Does anyone seriously believe this laughable Supreme Court of Facebook would ever issue a ruling that its management doesn't approve of or hasn't previously signed off on? Imagine scoff determining that Facebook needs to break up, or that Zuck needs to sell his stock or step down or whatever. Yeah, right. It's a grift for the scoffers and exists solely to provide a veil of accountability to an unaccountable organization. That is It's good stuff there. Really good stuff. And last question comes in from Nadarb. Says, couldn't Trump file a suit against Facebook for defamation? Well, he's a public figure, and I don't think that there was any actual malice there on that first one. That's not true, right? So of course, there's actual malice, but is it legally actual malice? No. But do they hate Trump? Yeah, they do. They are saying that he is a danger to society. Therefore, he can't be on their platform, even though he was found not guilty, couldn't be convicted of any court of inciting a riot in his second impeachment. Yeah, it's just part of the process. You know, when you're president, people can say a lot of things about you. Courts are just going to say that's fair game. This is not even a bad thing. I mean, this is a bad thing that they're trying to do to Trump. But people have said a lot of bad things about Trump, and he cannot sue them over it. All right, so we've got 2 more segments, and we got to pick up the pace just a little bit. All right, so let's change gears. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary, a guy by the name of Alejandro Mayorkas, raising some eyebrows, just gave an interview very recently where he's talking about national borders as, quote, lines that mark national boundaries and divide us, but they shouldn't be seen as borders. So it's sort of lines that are just national boundaries, but not as borders. So we're going to break this down, and then we're going to take a look at what's Kamala Harris doing about all this, because this has been going on for some period of time. Several months ago, she was appointed by Joe Biden to come out here and solve this problem for us, and not happening. What's the deal? Let's take a quick look. Over from Breitbart.com, this says that the Department of Homeland Security chief says that we should not see borders as lines that mark national boundaries and divide us. That's very unifying. It says, rather than viewing borders solely as the lines that mark national boundaries and that divide us from one another, we should see borders as a point of connection. It's beautiful. As the place where the flow of people and goods from different countries interact and intersect. Wow, that's profound. Mayorkas declared during an annual conference hosted by the Council of Americas on Tuesday. His comments came amid a border crisis at the U.S. national border, fueled by a migrant surge, primarily from Central America's northern triangle region like Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The flow of migrants is overwhelming DHS resources and the border agents who operate under the department, forcing the release of migrants into U.S. communities. Not to mention that there are still kids in cages, way more kids in cages than Trump had kids in cages. And here we have the Department of Homeland Security, which is supposed to be protecting the homeland, securing the homeland. They have an entire department for that, in fact. And he's supposed to be doing that, but now he's talking about this as they're not even really, borders. They're just sort of national boundaries, sort of like, the difference between when you cross the border between Arizona and California, it's not even a big deal. Just kind of drive on through. Same deal. It's just a border. Here he is, the actual quote from him. This is him today. America's society. We already read that quote. He says, we should see the borders as a point of connection. This view recognizes the good that we can offer each other and the connection between international exchange and economic vitality. Our vision for migration management and our immigration system is rooted in the belief that people should be treated with dignity and respect. This is not inconsistent with enforcing the law and securing our border. So I don't even know what that means. I don't know if you understand what that means with dignity and respect, because this administration has them in space blankets stacked on top of one another. So I don't know what that means. Their decisions on changing the immigration policies resulted in the current conditions, in one man's humble opinion. When you say that, well, you come into America, we're not going to require you to stay in Mexico under the Trump administration. That was their policy. Well, people listened. Oh, we don't have to wait in Mexico. We can just come right into America? Yeah, you can. So there is a surge. My opinion, it's a direct result of the policies that they have implemented. So their own policies now are resulting in people being treated without dignity and without respect. Then this guy comes out and says, well, it's migration management. It's rooted in dignity and respect. We all see the pictures. Jerk. We can all look at them on CNN, anywhere else you want. Not good images. So you can tell us how you're handling the situation, but you're not doing a good job of it, because we all see the images. We all see these little children being dragged across the desert. It's about to get really hot really soon, and people are going to start dropping dead. So rather than you getting out here and telling us how much your migration management system is rooted in dignity and respect, how about you just do it? How about you just start making some policy changes that will lead to actual dignity and respect? Or do you just want to keep talking about it? We also have some more here from this article. It says many of the migrants reaching the border are unaccompanied children and families from Central America. Republicans have accused the Biden administration of pushing an open borders agenda. Biden keeps insisting the border is closed. He struck a more welcoming tone as a candidate. Migrants keep coming in, with some released into U.S. communities. Biden administration message is falling on deaf ears in part due to online ad campaigns by human smugglers who promise guaranteed entrance into the U.S. under the current president. Human smugglers, including those who rape women and girls during their journey, benefit financially from the influx of migrants. So they're creating a new market. The policies are creating a market that is allowing people to be exploited by these people who are raping women and bringing children across. Republicans have blamed Biden undoing Trump-era immigration policies for the border crisis. Mayorkas indicated that the Biden administration is working on creating an immigration system where people are treated with dignity and respect, except for today. This is not inconsistent with the law and securing the border. Governments of Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador have directly and indirectly blamed the Biden administration's welcoming tone for the surge at the U.S. southern border. And we have talked about this repeatedly. I've played clips from migrants coming across. Say, yeah, I mean, basically, we were scared under Trump, but now, because they are telling us that they're going to let us in, we're coming. And this current administration still wants to blame Trump. Mayorkas mentioned that DHS is working to ensure a robust and safe movement of goods and people across the Western Hemisphere. So, okay, that's great. So what is the problem here? Why is this still ongoing? Because everything was supposed to be, rainbows and sunshine under this new administration. We were going to return to normal, return to decency, because Donald Trump was a racist, white Cheeto monster who was a supremacist in all regards, and he was responsible for every single ill in America, not to mention the world and theoretically the universe. So Kamala Harris now, according to Joe Biden, was the right person for the job at the right time. And she's going to come in here and clean this whole thing up. So where is she? What is she doing? What is she blaming this on? Well, here's Kamala Harris says that the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience is part of the root causes of migrant crisis. Okay, sounds good. So nothing that you guys did, but it has to do with the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience, whatever the hell that means. Okay, so here it goes. On Tuesday, she claimed that the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience in northern triangle countries was one of the root causes of the migration crisis at the southern border, along with a list of other things, including violence and government corruption. Okay, so we're just going to add those down at the bottom of the list. So Republicans have pointed to the rolling back of the Trump-era border protections, like the construction of the border wall and the migrant protection protocols for the surge in migration at the southern border this year, which has left the Biden administration scrambling to house them and has seen migrants being released into the interior without court dates. This article comes over from Fox News. But the White House has doubled down on its emphasis on root causes such as violence and poverty for the reason for the surge. Harris, who has gone 41 days without a press conference on the border since being given the task of leading the diplomatic effort with Mexico and Central America, has repeatedly made a similar emphasis. And I remember this. Kamala Harris was sitting there next to Joe Biden. And when that happened that day, we came here on this channel and I was like, oh boy, this is like the biggest bag of garbage that anybody has ever handed to Kamala Harris in her whole life. Hey, this border crisis that we haven't been able to figure out since the history of history for the last 30 years. I've been alive my whole life. We've always been talking about the border problem. Always. Because we have a bunch of politicians and nobody wants to do anything. Why would they? They're politicians. They don't get reelected if they accomplish things. They need stuff to do. So they don't ever solve it. We're still talking about it. When Joe Biden got first sworn in and he was sitting there, oh, we got Kamala Harris here. Here you go, dear. Solve this problem that no other party or person or anybody has been able to solve ever. You're going to handle it. And you could see it in her face like, oh, God. Your time is coming there, old man. You could tell Kamala's going, all right, I'm going to handle this one for now, but better watch your step there, buddy boy. White House has doubled down, already read that, on Tuesday. In a speech to the Washington Conference on the Americas, she made a distinction between acute causes, such as drought, food insecurity, and COVID-19, and long-standing root causes. She says, I'm thinking of corruption, violence, and poverty, the lack of economic opportunity, the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience, and the lack of good governance. Okay. Harris has cited weather and climate issues before when talking about the, quote, root causes. Recently, at a Northern Triangle roundtable in April, she spoke extensively of the list of issues she believes are root causes. We're looking at extensive storm damage because of extreme climate. We're looking at drought in an area, in a region where agriculture is one of the most traditionally important bases for their economy. We're looking at what's happening in terms of food scarcity as a result of, in fact, incredible food insecurity. We call hunger food insecurity. We're looking, therefore, at a number of issues that also relate to poverty, extreme poverty. There's no violence coming out of those regions. We look at the root causes. We're also looking at issues of corruptions. We're looking at the issues of climate resiliency and the lack of economic opportunity. So basically, everything is a problem. Is there anything that she missed on this? Can we talk about, is there anything else? Is the United States responsible for that? Is Kamala Harris, is this part of her job duties? As the border solution czar, is she going to go fix all of these things? Climate resilience, we have lack of economic opportunity, droughts, food scarcity, agriculture, food insecurity. Is she going to fix all of those things? Because that is a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of countries out there that could use her hand in solving all of those issues. In fact, America could use some of her help. Can she solve this for Americans or not? Somebody else got that ball? Is that Joe Biden's job? And then Kamala Harris is going to go fix all of these problems for other people? I want everybody in the world to have food. I want everybody in the world to have what they need to live and do well. But America can't handle that, okay? America doesn't have the ability to save the entire planet. We do have an ability to create some pretty clear policies that will encourage people to immigrate into this country the right way, not being dragged across the border by coyotes and people who are raping women and children and bringing over unaccompanied minors just as collateral, just as like a suitcase, a human being like a suitcase, so that some drug trafficker can work their way into the country because they brought little Tommy with them to sneak across the border. Oh, it's a kid, and Biden administration just has policies that allow this to continue forward, and it is a humanitarian crisis. Kamala Harris running around the world, well, hunger, food insecurity, agricultural problems. Okay, how about you just change your policies that are creating incentives that are causing those people to put themselves in harm's way? Just a thought. On Tuesday, Harris touted a $310 million investment the U.S. was making in Central America, part of a massive $4 billion investment the Biden administration is promising to tackle the root causes in the region. Yeah, I mean, okay, that's great. I know there are people hungry in America, but that's good. She's going over there. She also said that she has spoken to world leaders, including Canada, Finland, Ireland, Japan, to try to help them, get them to help the Northern Triangle. Recently, the Biden administration has said it's considering sending cash to Central America to dissuade migrants from making the journey north, or you just change the freaking policy. Harris has come under fire for not visiting the border or holding a press conference. She has held virtual meetings with leaders of Guatemala and is planning a trip to Guatemala next month. Big. Yeah. Good job. Virtual meetings. That's great. Good job there, Kamala Harris. And we also know that this is, folks, this is not like 100 people coming across the border on a regular basis, okay? This is posted Monday. Over from CNN. Says here from Geneva Sands that nearly 6,000 undocumented immigrants are apprehended daily. Not a month, daily. At the U.S.-Mexico border in April. After a spike in apprehensions of undocumented immigrants in March raised alarms, CNN shows the numbers remains elevated, but appears to have plateaued. Oh, that's good. So we're leveling out about 6,000 people a day. The continued influx of people at the border reveals an ongoing struggle for the administration that has rushed to increase capacity for the thousands of migrant families, children, and adults crossing into the U.S. each week. Throughout April, Customs and Border Protection encountered an average of just under 6,000 every day, which is in line with the March average of 5,500 every day. Very, very big numbers. And they're going to just allow it to happen. And this is a big problem. Let's take some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you want to support the show, we would really appreciate it. That's the place to do it. It's watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Type that into a web browser, and then you can ask questions just like this, as well as get a copy of my book, download the slides that we just went through, and get a lot of other goodies, including meeting with and connecting with other people who are interested in free speech and free expression. Watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, questions. First one is from It's Ed. Says Milton Friedman recognize that you can't have open borders and a welfare system like the one we have at the same time. Also, Honduras does not have the safety risk that America has. You can't really compare the two countries. Yeah. Right, because people will just come and get on the welfare system, right? And then it's going to bankrupt the welfare system, which is going to wreck the host country. And this is also a problem, right? Think about that. 5,000 people a day. What if those 5,000 or 6,000 people a day stayed in their countries and petitioned their government for a redress of grievances? Said, hey, we're not going to uproot our family and take our families across, thousands of miles into the United States. We want our own liberty, damn it. We want our own country. We want our own economic opportunities. We want our own freedoms. They have a ton of land down there. They have a ton of resources. It's a beautiful country all over the place. North America, the southern part of North America, South America, never been, would love to go. Spent a lot of time in Mexico and elsewhere. Beautiful resources. But they have a corrupt government. They have, just like Kamala Harris pointed out, they have a lot of problems internally. If the people who are immigrating into the United States stayed there and said, we're going to demand changes, we're going to demand democracy, or we're going to create our own republic, we're going to hold you people accountable. But instead, they don't need to do anything because the United States is a pressure release valve. As soon as there's anything bubbling up, as soon as you have hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are in economic strife, who are in the world-class hardship because of their own government, rather than them demanding a change, democratizing, and becoming a first world country, they don't. They just say, okay, well, and they don't have to, because all of the disaffected, all of the people, they just get on the road and they come into the United States. And so many people in America are sitting here, patting themselves on the back going, God, we're just really great people. We're awesome. We're outstanding because we're humanitarian. We care about people in the world. We care about these poor migrants coming across the desert into the United States. And guess what? I do too. So do I. I want those people to have a good opportunity, and I want their kids to, and I want their kids' kids to, and I want the whole world to participate in the same beautiful thing that we have in America. A lot of it is rooted, I think, in our economic system and our political system. And so if we can help other countries get to that status, that's a good thing. But if we just allow them to continue to be corrupt and continue to just export their disaffected citizens to a different country that will happily take them, well, what happens? Yeah, very nice that all of those, the people who are willing to uproot their lives and make the change, we're grateful that we can help them as a country. But what about the other people who are still just seated down there in these corrupt bastions of economic oppression? And there is no incentive to reform the place because everybody who was there just bails. They just leave. Guess what, folks? It's going to happen in America too. People are just going to say, I'm sick of this crap. All of the rich people, all of these people that are stigmatized and are scapegoated at every turn, they're just going to say enough already. If you want to take 53% of their taxes, whatever the new tax plan is, and then you're printing $4 trillion on top of that. So the inflation is also, it's basically reducing the value of the dollar in addition to taxing it. And we have all, just an overly burdensome society for the people who are the engine of the world. They're just going to say, I've had enough of this stuff, right? And we're out. The people who can move will move. And guess who gets hurt? The people who stay behind. So all of these liberals congratulating themselves like we're helping migrants, a small segment of them, but it's like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he can eat for a lifetime. It's the same concept. And by creating incentives that encourage people to leave their bad environment and come to our environment, you're creating a pressure relief valves that only encourages more corruption and more hardship and more economic oppression for all of those people still living in the country. So how about we create some incentives, then we can talk disincentives, then we can have some real conversations about what we can do as America to help these foreign countries, but not while they are exporting the strong people that need to stay in those countries to enact real change. All right, no doubt in the House says Biden admin found they didn't have decision authority on all laws affecting the border and face planted into them. For two people who have spent years in government, their ignorance of how the laws work is astounding. Yeah, I agree with that. Jeremy Matrida in the House says the border is exactly as the current administration wants it to be. I agree with that. When any representative speaks about fixing the border, they are only paying lip service. They wasted no time in destroying many parts of our economy in the first day in office and couldn't fix things if they actually wanted to. Action always speaks louder than words. Good to see you, Jeremy. Good point on that one. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that both parties really have no interest in solving the border. I think that they both have strong incentives for keeping it open. I think Democrats largely in terms of votes, Republicans largely in terms of labor. And so we're not going to see a solution. If it was a real problem, we would have seen a solution. Like, cryptocurrency, right? They're going to come after that hard because both parties are angry about that. But both parties are happy about a broken border. Liberty or Death says, amazing. On any given day, there are roughly 500,000 people living on the street. 2/3 of that are veterans. 23 veterans kill themselves every day. But hey, let us take care of these illegal aliens first. Let's send them money to Central America on top of money we are sending them already, absent a treaty ratified by the Senate. Good call. Nicely done, Liberty. Nice summation there. We have _shades says, appreciate your extra spunkiness today. Voicing all of our frustrations in spicy humor. More please, LOL. I'm on one today. I get so irritated with this, all right. We got one more segment and then we're going to get out of here. Good to see you _shades. And once again, if you want to support the show, that's at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right. Last segment of the day. Black Lives Matter. We've been wondering on this channel for some time what they stand for and really what they want to accomplish, because this is a movement that has gotten a lot of steam, and I have been critical of it for some period of time because I really have not been able to wrap my head around what they want. When I first became acquainted with this movement, I was kind of excited because I am a criminal defense attorney and I like the idea that we have justice reform taking place in this country, that we have people rowing in the same direction. We're going to actually talk about some meaningful solutions, things like ending qualified immunity, or things like mandatory body cameras, or how about, a national registry of all Brady violations or something like that, right? Just ideas. Not saying I endorse any of that. Don't particularly agree with a national registry on anything, but you get my point. We're talking about concrete examples. Should we have, more training or more standards or whatever? Actual solutions. Because there are a lot of them, and I've gone through probably 50 of them over the course of this channel and this program. But I had a difficult time understanding, what does BLM want? What's going to make them satisfied? Because I'm open to a conversation about that, and I mean that genuinely, because I am on the side of justice reform. But I really couldn't get any idea. Fortunately for me, though, Black Lives Matter released a list of their demands. So we know what they want. It's clear. There are 7 of them, and they put them on their website. If you want to go look it up, you can check it out. Go to blacklivesmatter.com/BLM-demands. The link is in our slide below. If you want to take a look, you can see it. Let's go through them so that we can wrap our heads around how we can solve all of these problems in America. Because Black lives do matter, right? We say that all the time, but is this what we're talking about? Are we talking about the value of human life, or are we talking about a political movement that is sort of steeped in one particular ideology? Because it's looking like the latter. Let's get into it. These are the list of 7 demands from BLM.com. It's at blacklivesmatter.com. So number 1. Well, and we want to frame out what was Black Lives Matter really? Where did it sort of come into the national limelight as a result of what? The George Floyd death. Okay, we saw that. The whole country was unified. Police reform. We don't like the idea that there's this concept that there are white officers who are racist, who are killing black men. The concept behind Black Lives Matter was to say Black Lives Matter, right? That there's this dynamic that exists in law enforcement that needs to be addressed, whether you agree with that or not, whether you agree that that is the solution. That was the original framing of this whole thing. Justice reform, this interaction between law enforcement and certain demographics in this country. So you would expect that their solutions, their demands would address that problem, wouldn't you? I mean, that's what I was hoping for. But let's see what we've got. Number 1, the first thing that they want to do, that they demand happens: convict and ban Trump. Okay. Convict and ban Trump from future political office. Okay. So what does that have to do with BLM? I don't know, but let's find out. We are joining Reps Omar, Presley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and others who are demanding Trump be immediately convicted in the United States Senate. He also must be banned from holding elected office in the future. Call your congresspeople and tell them. Number 1, ban Trump from everything. Okay, well, you guys tried that twice. Didn't work either time. He can run for office again. Not going to get impeached again. So that's not going to happen. So, okay. Good. We're off to a good start, though. We have number 2, expel Republican members of Congress. Okay, so this is great. So remove Trump. So that doesn't really talk about justice reform at all, or anything about black lives. It's just Donald Trump. Then we also have expel Republican members of Congress who attempted to overturn the election. What? Oh, and incited a white supremacist attack. Oh, so now it's coming together. More than half the Republican representatives and multiple senators stoked Trump's conspiracy theories and encouraged the white supremacists to take action and overturn the election. We are supporting Cori Bush's resolution to expel them from Congress for their dangerous and traitorous actions. We also support steps to bar them from seeking another office. Okay. Well, I guess it's the white supremacists now. So rather than justice reform, now it's an anti-white supremacist movement. Because the cops are white supremacists and the cops are part of the American system, and the American system was created by white supremacists, and we reverse engineer all of that. Donald Trump was at the top of America, so he is sort of the leader of the white supremacist movement, so we got to get rid of him. Yeah, okay, so there you go. So that's how it makes sense. They want a full investigation of the ties between white supremacy and the Capitol Police and law enforcement and the military. So again, all January 6th stuff. They want to permanently ban Donald Trump from all digital media platforms. Okay, does that have anything to do with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Jacob Blake, any of those? Throwing Trump off Twitter? I don't know, maybe. They will also want to defund the police. Oh, the police that met our BLM protesters this summer with assault rifles, tear gas, and military-grade protective gear were the same police that on Wednesday met white supremacists with patience and the benefit of the doubt, going so far as to pose for selfies with rioters. The contrast was jarring, but not for black people. We've always known the police truly protect and serve. DC has the most police per capita in the country. More funding is not the solution. So officially, defund the police. And I wonder if Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, do they support that? Do they support defund the police? Because I know they support BLM. Now that BLM says we want to defund the police, the pertinent question that any competent person in our American media would ask the president or the vice president, do you still support BLM given the fact that they have actively saying that they demand the defunding of the police? Yes or no? Pick a side on it. Next up, we have this that says, don't let the coup be used as an excuse to crack down on our movement. In response to the coup, politicians have already introduced Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2021. We've seen this playbook before. The laws are used to target black women and black and brown communities for heightened surveillance. Republicans are already trying busy. Okay, whatever. And then they want to pass the Breathe Act. Police were born out of slave patrols, they say. We cannot reform an institution built on white supremacy. We need a new radical approach to public safety and community investment. President Biden has already drawn on the Breathe Act in his executive actions, calling for racial equity screens in federal programs, investing in environmental justice at historic levels, and engaging with system-impacted communities. The Breathe Act paints a vision of a world where Black Lives Matter through investments, housing, education, health, and environmental justice. So there you go. You got the 7 things they want to do. They want to end white supremacy and support BLM's demands. They've got 7 demands. You know what they are. One of them is about defunding the police. Now, governors, some of them are not having it. Ron DeSantis over from Florida says that some want to defund the police, but in Florida, we're funding them and then some by providing all of our heroes $1,000 bonuses. This represents more than 174,000 first responders across the state. So Governor DeSantis posted this, and you can see this. He is funding the police, so he is just rubbing salt in the wound for all of the Democrats, and he's doing a great job, as you can see. He got the, defund the police. We're going to mark that out. It says fund the police. Here he is with the police, handing them a check. Just being a thorn. Daily Caller says he announces his $1,000 bonuses to law enforcement. Says some want to defund the police. We're funding the police.
The legislature in this legislative session, we need to do bonuses for law enforcement. Some want to defund. Some want to defund the police. We're funding the police and then some.
All right. So there is Ron. We've got one quick question before we get out of here. Comes over from Sharon Quidney, says that BLM has nothing to do with and no interest in justice reform. What they want is a Marxist revolution like they had in Russia. I agree with that. You know what else they want? New houses. Many of them. Nice big ones. In areas that, might not be of their demographic that we know of. So great questions. Again, those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I want to thank all of you who are there and supporting us. I want to start by welcoming some new people to the program. We have big welcomes to Lanky_operator. Welcome to you. Welcome to Alexi in the house. We also have Liz0524 who signed up. Very much appreciate all of you. Welcome to the community. We're grateful that you're here and supporting the show. Also want to say thanks to all of you who asked great questions and left some great comments today. You see who you are up there on the screen. And a big thanks to all of our other Watching the Watchers community supporters. And so we're going to call out some of them now. If you want to join us, it's over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Great platform. We got Girly099 in the house. We have Estimated Lot. We have Rags who signed up. We got Ayako Bachi. Welcome to you. We got Tweak in the house. We got Lisa Lemon. Welcome to, and hello to Sandy Paws. Hello to Serenity 8. We have LT13. I said hello to you. Road Trek Girl is also in the room. We've got Officer Warrior. We have Toots Magoots, Dr. EMB. We got Carl. We got AC Whack. We have Al Huber, Larry Light. We got Ice Wolf, No Doubt, Drag, John M16, Lou Walker, Chairman of Board, Defusco, and Paula MK, and others. All of you, thank you so much for your support at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you're not already over there, you can get a lot of good stuff, and there's more stuff coming. I am finishing up my second recording area, and I'm very excited about that. So I'm looking forward to doing some fun stuff, some stuff that's maybe a little bit more fun, right, than what we talk about on the show. Although I have a ton of fun here with you. I hope you do too. But you know what I'm saying. A little bit more non-YouTube stuff that we can get into over at Local. So I'm excited about that. I've got some ideas percolating around up there, and I look forward to sharing them with you very soon. If you want to be a part of that, it's at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can also, when you go over there, get a copy of my book. It's called Beginning to Winning. You can download it for free. There's a PDF version available. Slides are also available over there, so download those as well. We've got a copy of my impeachment party document. If you want to impeach anybody in this country, I've done the heavy lifting for you folks. You can just download the template, fill in these little yellow boxes, and you can impeach the hell out of whoever you want. It's a lot of fun. I tried it for a couple people. If you look back on the channel, I think we got Schumer and Harris both have impeachment documents, so those are fun. We also have a copy of my existence system personal productivity tool is available for download at Locals. You can share links and have conversation throughout the day, including being a part of the live chat that we just took questions from. And you can also meet and converse with great people, which is really what it's all about. It's about building that community where we can have some fun going through the news. We can learn a little bit more about what's going on. We can meet each other, support one another in our projects, and we'll see where it goes from there. So my friends, I want to thank you so much for your support and for being here today. Before we get out of here, one final reminder that I am a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. My team and I, we love to help good people who've been charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases, and beyond that, in their lives. So if you happen to know anybody who's been charged with a crime in the state of Arizona, we would be honored and humbled if you sent them our direction so that we could lend a hand. We can help people with any type of criminal charge. Low-level misdemeanors, high-level misdemeanors, felony offenses, drug offenses, domestic violence, DUIs, anything and everything in between. Even traffic cases, we help people get points off their license, restore their driver's license so that they can get to work and pick up their kids and all of that stuff. So if you need help with any of that, we offer free case evaluations. We would love a referral from you. We'll make sure that anybody who connects with us or comes in our office leaves better than we found them. And we are very humbled that you would even consider us in providing the opportunity to help, because it keeps us going. I mean, we have a whole team of people here that are energized about justice, as am I. So we would appreciate it. And that is it from me, my friends. We're going to be back here same time, same place tomorrow. It's at 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is Pacific. 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central in Texas, and 7 p.m. on the East Coast for that one Florida man. Everybody have a tremendous night sleep. Eat well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.